Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome to the channel. My name's Alckemy. We had a poll recently where I asked what you want to see in the future for videos, and 44% of you said faceplant tutorials. So I've got a playlist, just so you know. I'll leave it in the cards or something up here, but yeah, I've kind of covered like everything from drums to bass to pads to plucks to leads. I'm sure that you want me to cover your favorite sound and your favorite song, but I don't really do that because I'm not them, and you shouldn't expect me to be able to do that. However, something that I think could be fun as an experiment to try is maybe taking a Bob Ross approach and doing some sound design from scratch. So if you like that kind of idea, or you like this kind of presentation-esque thing, then I guess it's kind of cool too, because I get to show you how good or bad I am at sound design and stumble through problems. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump in while you have time to hit the like button, and we are going to start with a couple of things, which is a limiter and a wavetable. Limiter is kind of self-explanatory. It's one of the most important things that I do in my sound design because I use copious amounts of distortion and crazy filtering and stuff and resonances, and so sometimes a limiter can help alleviate some of those problems. There is a caveat to that, which I'll talk about when we get there. So with that being said, I'm feeling kind of bassy, but maybe not too crazy. So let's go ahead and give ourselves like 20 minutes, and we're just going to build a patch from scratch. And then I'll show you or give you hints about where this can lead. One thing that I want to do is you'll notice that these guys on these harmonics are phases that you can rotate, and something that I want to do, at least for now, is double click at least the first such and such on here. Maybe the first, yeah, I guess the first 15, because it will change the, I don't know, character of the sound. Maybe not so much as timbre, but it's going to help me kind of dictate things. So generally what I do is I open this up and I use the pen tool, and I'll create a single harmonic on number 1, which is right here, and that is just a fundamental. So especially if I'm doing bass or something, it's not always required, but sometimes it's helpful when you have a really good fundamental, because, well, it means that your bass is going to sound good. And then I'll pick a subsequent harmonic, whether it be a third, a fourth, a fifth, a second, doesn't really matter. And then what I'll do is I'll create a shape based off of around that. So that way we've got really clean distinctions between these two, and then everything else around that is just kind of extra stuff, as you'll see. So if we take a look at this, look at how complex this wavetable has already become. I've got more information on wavetable stuff on masterclasses, not that I'm trying to sell you on anything, but just saying, hey, some resources available. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the opposite side, and we're going to change the wavetable. So maybe instead of a fourth, we'll use a third. And then maybe we'll do some kind of ladder, or staircase rather, and we're just going to kind of create some, ooh, that's interesting, look at that. Sometimes drawing waveforms and stuff can be really fun, because you'll notice how, like, look at this, see, it's kind of creating crazy shit, and there is a time and place for that, but at some point, if you have like all the harmonics kind of like this, then it just creates noise, and you don't usually want something like that. But having something kind of like that gives us a crossfade automatically, and we can take a listen to this and see what that sounds like. Let me turn this on, and let me make sure that this is going to work. And let's try a D sharp. Okay, so that's okay. Let's go back into this, and let's add some more harmonics to that final frame. This isn't even my final frame, and this is going to sound like shit now, and that's okay. But what I want to do is we are going to add a filter. And with this filter and this low pass, we can kind of create some interesting movement in between these two by stacking filters. So I'm going to go to this one and turn this all the way up. We're on a low pass filter. And somewhere around here, I'm going to create a keyframe and move this kind of downwards. And then on here, I'm going to move it back up. And then as we move over here, this is going to kind of come back down, but maybe with some interesting resonances or something. So we can change the slope of this, which I find to be really cool, because as opposed to poles, it's just a slope. So look at that. That's really neat, and you can do some really cool stuff with that. But let me kind of give ourselves a relatively sharp cutoff here. And now we've made our wavetable just a little bit more complex. Sort of. Now the other thing that's cool about this is once we hit that OK button, like I just did, we can actually apply a lot of these. So right now here's a notch, and generally speaking you're not really going to notice a whole bunch of notch stuff unless if you're in between the first harmonic, which I don't know what happened there, but we lost that. Oh no, it's still there. I'm tripping. Yeah, so anywhere between the first and like say the 40 at the most, because everything after this is just really high pitch and stuff. But what we can do is create some subtlety with this for funsies and just kind of click here. And you really want to make sure that you don't highlight anything. You really want to make sure that you're clicking on a different frame, because that's how you're going to get it to morph when I start moving stuff around. Yeah, that looks good. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. Almost exactly the same. Maybe it'll sound different though. Alright, there's a lot that you can do with wavetables, and this is not a wavetable tutorial, but what I am going to do is add some automatic EQ, because what this can do in certain cases is add some high end to your sound. So we're just going to kind of dance around this a bit, and sometimes this wants to be high end, sometimes this wants to be completely off, maybe not 100%, but now this is a much more diverse wavetable. You got to be careful with this though, because as you scroll through here you might notice that fundamental dip a little bit, and a little bit's okay. As you can see, it's like barely wiggling, but if it's like totally removed, then that kind of voids the base table. Let's just call it that instead of a wavetable. Okay, enough about wavetable stuff. Let's add some distortion to this. Let's make it a Reese. Okay, tutorial's over. Okay, now that's significantly louder, so from here on, just, you know, if you need to turn the volume down or whatever, but I'm going to try to talk a little louder so that way this is matching. But yeah, between this wavetable, yeah, some really good movement in between that. That's typically what I go for, and the thing about this is that this is a super versatile table. Just as some general advice, if you are trying to do something like a Riddim table or something, then you can get away with this. You might want to low pass that fundamental that we made, and you know, just start getting into like crazy amounts of FM and stuff. So we can kind of tiptoe down that direction a bit. So if we apply something kind of like so, now we can play with the harmonic. So there's kind of this duality with some of this stuff. Let's talk about like a trifecta. So on one end, starting with simple waveforms is the best way to build, because you can do so much to it. So sine waves, saw waves, square waves, but triangle, anywhere from a saw to a triangle, generally speaking, you can get some sick stuff. And it's very versatile because of how malleable it is. But when you have a complex waveform, a lot of times if it's met with a simple waveform, then you get pretty cool results. Sometimes if you have a simple waveform and you FM it with a complex waveform, then obviously you're going to get cool results. But generally speaking, if you have really complex with really complex, then there's not much, or like you can't go that far before it just starts sounding like noise. So just let that be known. But what we can do is we can play with the harmonic now. And that sounds cool, but maybe something that we can do is create an LFO. And I don't even make Riddim bass, so I'm sure that people are going to be leaving this in the comment section of like, that doesn't sound like Riddim, how dare you? And it's like, okay, you're right. But the thing is I know a thing or two about bass design, so this might not end up being a Riddim bass, but we can still make it sound somewhat cool. And if you learn something, then take what you learn from this and then make your Riddim bass from what you see from all the other tutorials. It doesn't fucking matter. So you can see here that we're playing with the amount here, and we've already like this is too far, this is not enough, and then we can kind of play it with just right. And then if we were to kind of so as you can see, we're getting some really cool stuff out of that. And something that we could also do is create like a really, really high screech from having lots of detune. So I'm going to turn this down a little bit. So if you're wanting to turn that into a super screechy bass, then you can use just a slight amount of delay, more distortion, more delay at a very low rate and very low feedback. So something kind of like this, and create some movement here. And what this will do is the feedback of this, and this is what I was going to talk about from before, is that the one caveat to the limiter being surpassed, two actually, the one that I know of is if you have too much feedback, then that'll actually get extremely loud even if you have a limiter. And then if you have a transient shaper with the clipping turned on, this will actually make everything super loud if you have drums and stuff. But ironically, the motto of 2020 is clip it and limit, but if you actually do this on the outside, then everything is kosher. But if for whatever reason, some people in my chat have explained it to me that like the limiter can't handle the clipping amount or something like that. I don't really know, but it's just try it for yourself, turn your volume down, you'll see what I'm talking about. So okay, cool. We've got a nice, interesting screecher, and so, you know, if you wanted to, what's it called, add some love to this, then we can use a fuse compressor. I particularly am really fond of the fuse compressor. I've got a review on it, and I'm not saying that any of you should go and buy it, because you can just use a stock OTT, but I like it because of this guy, that dude. What this is a soft clip limiter, so this is pretty much killing two birds with one stone. And what we can do now is we've got the movement, and we've got the timbre and the texture and the size of this. We might want to put a sub under this here in just a second. I'll show you how to do that. But by making this much more loud, you know, I mean, from this point on, you can turn this into anything. So if we were to even just do something like this, something that might be wise if you are doing this is, for cleanliness sake, you can actually take this guy and right click this and type in 100, and now the volume will follow this, and that way you don't have to work so hard at trying to make everything match, right? Because everything is with the volume, then you're going to get moments of silence, which I think is really important in any kind of rhythmic music. Music is rhythm in some cases. I don't know, I guess ambient doesn't really have a lot of rhythm, it's just swells. But I digress. So anyways, that's something that you can do if you want to create different pieces of movement. And then what's really cool about this is you can kind of just finagle this until you find something that you like. Some other thing that you can do, which is just as fun, is I actually don't deviate from this morph a lot, but we can do the same thing to where we map this, right click, 100, and do something like that. And so now we're going to have a lot more shapes to play with. And you can create your own wavetable. In theory, you can actually pull up the same wavetable that we just made and put it into here if you want to, and that's part of the reason why Faceplant is the GOAT. But yeah, I mean, we can just do like a, you know, something like this. And so let's say I have this at like 140 or whatever. Right. So what's also cool about this is, and again, I don't really know, but Something that we can do in order to create some variation behind this is we can click on this little guy and we can just create a step shape, something kind of like this. And what's cool about this is that this is a really cool and easy way, what just happened there? This is a really cool and easy way to get different rhythmic patterns that are still going to be in line with your tune. Because right now you'll see that this is at 4/16, but what I can do is maybe set this to 32/16, maybe 32/4, maybe 32/8. Okay, yeah, maybe 32/16. I'm sorry. But what we can do with this is we can move this up to 32 and move this down to 1. And so now, maybe 2. And now what this will do is you'll see that we're creating different pieces of rhythm whenever this triggers. So if I were to play that same note, now we've got a cool little movement piece or whatever that is taking us through this and creating some interesting placements. And then what's also cool is we can even use this to kind of sweep through the table if we want to. So maybe if I move this up a little bit more. Yeah, lots of cool little ways that you can create lasers and whatnot in order to have some fun. So let's take a break from this for a second. I'm going to double click on here, and what I want to do very quickly is just touch on the sub. So what we can do to make this easy for ourselves is we're just going to hold Option and double click on the wavetable. And on this wavetable, we're just going to go from a saw to a sine or something along these lines. And there's a couple of routing options that we can do in which to send this into the proper placement. So on one end, the reason why I duplicated this was that way I don't have to change the table stuff. So you'll see that this is still mapped. So if we were to turn this back on, it's going to work. The other thing is that it's just, I don't know, it's just easier to pull up another wavetable or something. So the issue with this in particular is that lane 1 is going into the delay and the distortion and all that other stuff. So what we might want to do is take this wavetable and drag to a new place, and that automatically created a new envelope for us. You'll notice here that the envelope here is the same. We don't really need to touch that. There's other use cases that we can do with this, but it's not really necessary. Some things that we can do is we can add some more distortion to this because everybody loves distortion. But instead of sending this into lane 1, we're going to take this into lane 2, and now this is going to have its own separate sub. So let's turn this back down, turn this back down. I know I just turned it back on, forgive me, but check this out. Now we should have our sub. So what's interesting about this is that I've just created a problem because this sub is actually taking out the interest and the brightness of this, right? So if I were to now, I'm not really sure what happened there, but something kind of moved off to where we lost the brightness of that, because before that was creating some sick sounds. So let's go ahead and back up and see what just happened there, because I'm a little confused. Ah, I know what we did. So I made a mistake right here, and as you can see, this phase plan or this wavetable is not being FM'd, so we took the wrong one. So let me back up. Let me back up. And I will show you what happened. See, this phase here is the one that's still attached. So what I should have done was taken the top one and move that down to a new table. And now what we'll do is upload that basic default wavetable or saw to sine, or whatever it is that you want to do. Now with this, we want to take this off to where this is at 7, and we just want to take the unison off here. We can leave this on if we want to, turn the level down. And this is part of the reason why I like doing this stuff, because I'm like, what the heck just happened? And now I got to figure it out. And that's how hopefully you are treating sound design, because it makes it a lot more fun to, instead of going for something specific, like just make some stuff and see what comes about. So now that we have that, hopefully this should have fixed the problem. Okay, so that's still going to lane 1. Let's send that to lane 2. So we are getting sub, but it's not that much. So what we can do is we can duplicate this. And what I'm going to do is just probably do the same thing here. I'm going to take it off of this one, and I am going to make this one just a little bit longer. So I right click 100, and I'm going to change the table on here to be just a little bit longer, so it might be a little bit more audible. Now we can hear that. And what's cool about this is that now we can actually customize this and create some cool things. So what I mean by that is this is clipped pretty standardly, which is because of the saturation here. But what we can do to make this a little bit thicker is come back in here and do a couple of things. For one, we can turn this up, and two, we can make this a little bit more 808-ish if we want to. We don't need the full thing because we're distorting this, or we can, but I don't want to turn this into an 808 tutorial. But from having this, you'll see that this is a little bit fatter. So now let's pull up a slice EQ and look at how that looks. We want to make sure that that third harmonic is not louder than our sub. There we go. Noise. Just a tad. So you see how we've got a really nice... Now one other thing that we can do is we can create a bell curve like this. And so if we play a higher note, then what's going to happen is it's going to do what's called fletching, and that's going to kind of start to try to, that needs to move over here. There we go. Which actually works out in our favor because this is not being interfered with this. Yeah, and it's still higher. Perfect. So what I just did was something that's basically respecting the Fletcher-Munson curve, and basically what that means is when you play a higher note, it's usually perceived as louder, just based off of the human ear, or how the human ear hears, for lack of better vocabulary. So when you fletch something, when you play those higher bass notes, sometimes ducking that right there when you play that stuff will give you a more even sound regardless of what note you're playing, because we're not really trying to take this up into the super high octaves anyways. We can, which we'll talk about here in a second, to maybe transform this into something else. But yeah, now that we have that, we can kind of combine both sounds together and see what that sounds like. Which is pretty sick. So let's go ahead and do one more trick, and then what we're going to do is we're going to flip-flop this patch and then kind of reverse it into being a respace, and then we'll do some quick filtering and stuff. And in fact, we don't even need to change this stuff because it'll end up being cool. But what I'm going to do is I am going to add some mid-side. And there's a couple of different ways to do this, and theoretically, if you wanted to, just for the sake of doing whatever, you can take out the low end on this if you want cleaner stuff. Just kind of listen to it. I can't really tell a difference, to be honest, so it's not that big of a deal. But with multipass on here, what we're going to do is create two bands, and now behind this, we are going to create another rack. Do I want to do that way? Sorry, let's back up here and let's go into Snap Heap. That's what I want to do. Alright, so we're going to have a parallel chain here, and then we're going to set up a stereo on this, just like this. One of them is going to be like this. One of them is going to be like this. And basically what we have now is a mid-side. You can also do it with a channel filter, or is that channel mixer? I don't remember what the setup is for this, but I'm pretty sure that it's in here. So encode mid-side or mono side only. So we could do this if you wanted to, and then copy this and then go sides only, which I'm glad that they included this because this is really confusing with how this works even for me. But just know that there's multiple ways to do this. There's multiple ways to do all this stuff. So with this mono signal here, if we listen to this, oh, we got to turn the mix up. That might be helpful. Let's do that again. So if you notice on this actually doesn't have any stereo on it. So one thing that we can do is we can bounce this, and then we can also solo this, so that way we're not getting the sub, because the sub should not be a part of the mid-side stuff. It can, but for this particular use case, we don't need that. So let's try that one more time. Yeah, I'm still not hearing anything. So let's try this. Okay. Now what we can do on this is, before this, we can actually add in a touch of chorus, or, well, there's a couple of ways to solve this. Let's go ahead and experiment with this first. There we go. So now that this is happening before here, this is only taking the sides, and we basically created a side signal, which will make it sound nice and thick. But something else that we can do with this, just to, you know, make it more interesting, is add in some kind of convolution reverb, because what would a bass be if we didn't have convolution reverb? All right, now that's a little bit long, so let's go ahead and back off of that. Pretty cool. The other thing that we can do is we can go crazy with the mid-side signal, because we can always just mix it in or whatever, but we can also make this sound super metallic. We can even distort it if we want to. Just some options, you know, some things of messing around. Now that it's a little bit too loud, we can kind of back off of that just a bit, or we can also mess around with creating a high pass here. And what I'm going to do is, instead of high passing it, which I just lied to you, I'm sorry, but instead of high passing it, I'm just going to take this and we're just going to use a shelf. So there we go. So let's go ahead and solo this again, so that way I can hear what's happening on the low end. So you can see that there's quite a lot to get in through this, and then we can kind of mix it into taste, and that's going to be kind of up to you. So now that we have that, we can always do a safety check here by having another limiter on here. So this channel is parallel to this one and then feeds into the limiter if you want. It's not required, but it is just something that you can do. We can change the polyphony to 1. We can turn on a glide if you want to. So I don't know, that could be kind of cool. And then of course you can mix in your sub and do whatever that you want to do with that. I tend to do this, which is probably not the best practice, but I love clipping, and I just like to make stuff sound just ridiculously fat. So taking a clipper shape on the outside and sounds pretty cool. So let's go ahead and back up now. And what I'm going to do in order to change this is a couple of things. I am going to turn all of this off. No, what I'm going to do is try to come up with an answer for how to utilize this. So let's go ahead and grab a macro here. And what I will do is a couple of things. one is I'm going to turn both this down to 100. You can't turn this down all the way. You need to make sure that it's at 100, because if it goes down all the way, then it's never going to come back up enough. So be sure to set your proportions appropriately. Appropriate proportions. Now that you have something like this, whenever we move this, it's going to dip down. And so what we can do is we can double click this, and you'll see here that this will go into 0. So the same thing with this as well. We need to make sure that this is matching up here. So let's go ahead and change that to 8 and 16 tenths, or 16 triplets. Sorry. And so basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to modify this to where if we turn this off, it's not going to do the thing. So the other piece to this is, there we go. Yeah. So let me see what this is doing. That one is controlling that one. The other one's controlling the other one. So what I'm going to try to do here is have some kind of flip-flop. I would like this to go and transition from it having motion and movement to it being a sustained sound. So, and the reason why is because I still am keen on trying to get this into a Reese or something. But I can already tell that we're going to run into some issues here because we are detuning this at 7. So what that means for me is I'm going to do something a little bit easier. I am going to set this here, and then I'm going to set this here. And now I'm going to take this macro and change both of these to this. So now this is off, and whenever I turn it on, so we'll call that dub screecher. Yeah. Now the next piece of this is we are going to grab a duplicate of this and take this off, take this here. We're going to change this to 2 voices, and that's fine. But what we're going to do now is set this at 100%, and just in case, for whatever reason, we're going to turn that signal down. So that way, if we have something here, well, now we've got a signal here that's pretty cool. But what we can do with this is, we can actually turn all this stuff off. Most of it anyways, because I think what's happening here, if I'm not mistaken, let me see, am I still soloing this? No, we're not. So okay, so what we'll do is we are going to turn this off, and what is this at? 28%. Wait, what? No, put that at 100%, and the mix is at 50. So 28, 50, 100. We're going to put this at 50, and then we're going to move this down 30%, whatever, and we'll set this to 28. We can leave the overdrive on, it doesn't really matter. But now what we have on this is something that helps provide the entire rack on here. So this is a way that you can divvy up resources because we've only got 3 lanes. You can do some processing to here, which, you know, again, there's multiple ways to organize this, but basically from this dub screecher, we're going to be changing this from a Reese into that dub sound. But seems like I may have made a mistake on here. Let's see. I think I did. So let's go ahead and backtrack a bit before we get into this. And what I'm going to do is something a little bit easier. So okay, so thank God for the undo button, right? I'm not really sure what I did, and that's okay. But what I'm going to do is, instead of fucking with this, I'm just going to turn this off and turn this on. So that way, we just have it, right? So sometimes you're going to have to back up and do some of this stuff. But what I'm going to do now is, again, we are going to move this over, and I'm going to, that's what I did, is I took the FM off of this again. Yeah, that's what I did. I have a bad habit of doing that. So that's okay, because this works too, right? You can set all this stuff on here if you want to maintain lane 1, but I think that we can just sacrifice this for an 8-star monster and then just use lane 2. If you get that reference, then I love you. So this one's on the bottom now. This is our respace, and we can move this off, set this to 100, and this turns on. We turn it off. So all right, sick. So now what we can do is, I've created another problem, which is interesting, because lane 2, oh no, this goes into lane 2, goes to lane 3. We're fine. Okay, sick. So what we'll do is, ouch. Let me see what I want to do here. I'm having fun. I hope you all are too, because we're going to add some distortion. And then what I'm going to do is probably just stack on a bunch of effects. And we could do this in multipass or snap heap or whatever. It doesn't really matter. In fact, something else that we could consider is having this to be bipolar, to where we've got a little bit of both, right? Because we'll come back to that in a second. Let me just get some of this stuff going. Let's make this relatively simple. So I'm just going to create a complex waveform, or sorry, complex filter table, kind of like so. And just for funsies, we are going to grab one of these guys. And I used to be that person that was like, yo, you can come in here and you can like move all of these. And sometimes I still do, but it's not worth it. Don't worry about it. Let's put this before the distortion. And what we can do now is close these guys and create, let's just create another LFO table. And I'm going to set this to like 24 semitones. I wish that this was just a Hertz value or an offset as opposed to that, whatever. It doesn't matter. But now that we have that, we can send everything into this and mess with this. Oh, and just so you know, one of the main reasons why I use shelves as opposed to cuts is because if you turn the mix off on a cut, then it doesn't it doesn't turn the mix off. But if you use a shelf, not only are you still preserving just a tad of that high end, you are able to automate the mix to a means of so this is a great way to create band passes and whatnot without having to open it up within Snap Heap and create a parallel chain or something like that. It's not perfect, but that's just my approach to why I do something like that. So for example, if I were to use a slice EQ like this and have a notch, so somewhere like here, and then I turn the mix off, it doesn't do anything. So just let that be known. So what we want to do now, yeah, we can really just map everything to a single macro. Now that I think about it, yes. Okay, I'm starting to think about remapping and stuff now. Sorry. We can fucking computing here. Apply the same motion here. So this one's going up, this one's going down. So we don't need to go super complicated with this, but check this out. Now I am curious. I want to see what happens if we turn this filter off. Okay, so that's an option as well. So if you've got a bandpass filter or something and you're trying to work on that, then you can do that, which I would argue bandpasses are the way to go. It just stinks that there's not a mix on any of these. So what I was talking about from before is doing something like this to where you've got a filter chain here, you do something like this, you apply your smooth, criminal, random, something of the sort like this, and then you have like 50% mix. Or you have a parallel chain that's a clean signal with this. So sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not good. It's just, you know, different ways of doing this, but we can just leave it on for the sake of the video. All right, we're starting to get kind of monstery now, but this is the cherry on top, is actually using a low pass. Multiple filters. You don't need to do frequency splitting. You can. In my experience, I honestly don't. Not that much anymore, unless if I just want to do it for fun. But having something like this, okay, so for funsies, we can attach a note to this and make this down to 1, and then we're going to set this to D1. And then we're going to set the range to 24 because I'm playing D1. And what's cool about phase plant is that if you use the pitch bend on here, that's a little much, but we can maybe back off of this just a tad. So maybe to like 2. That's pretty cool. So yeah, sometimes messing around with a filter in that way can create some cool and interesting things. Okay, that's still on. So we can kind of apply the same thing here, like I was talking about, where yeah, that's how I'm going to do that. I'm going to add a remapping here. But yeah, we can add a multipass, and we just need 2 bands. You can use as many bands as you want, but I'm just going to create a small reverb. This is some really good sauce for giving your stuff a little bit of space, but you're going to notice that I'm turning the dampen and the early up and then move the size down. This is the smallest way to, or this is the smallest reverb that you can make outside of convolution. It's just what I've found. If anybody has an answer about how you can create a, you know, even shorter one or whatever, then there's that. But finding a mix between the two usually is a good way to go. So see how much tail there is? We don't really want that. See how it's a lot more shallow now? Now, something that you can do is we could open up and like do all kinds of crazy stuff to this. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move this down by quite a bit to like say 100 hertz because the sub is way the fuck over there. But the other thing that we can do is just add a touch of chorus on this. So you can turn the spread down. Do this. I like 3 taps. Tap, tap, tap. And if you wanted to, I'll show you a cool trick. We can also automate or modulate a phaser. So what I'm going to do is set this at 50%, and I want to modulate this, but I cannot grab this modulator here and do that here, unless if you use a secret cheat code, which is mapping this to a macro. Set the range of how far you want this to go. So 350 to 810, let's go to like 1000. And now we can actually map this to this here. And so now we've got some phaser movement along with the other stuff that we have stacked. Still think that's a little bit too much reverb, and I actually think that what's happening is the fuse compressor is pulling that out more. So we're gonna go down to like that much. And then what's cool is we can just change this if we want to. So what's cool is, I don't know if you noticed or not, but because we're cycling through a really smooth wavetable, we can get extra movement out of this as opposed to only having one shape. And then just like how I did with this LFO, we could, you know, make the movement different or whatever, or you can randomize it or whatever you want to do, Brad. So now that we have this, what I want to do with this is create a couple of things here. The first thing is creating some remaps, because right now this is mapped to all of these guys, right? And so basically what I'd like to do is, instead of this crossfading in between, I want it to be the left is off, the right is on, up until you get to that point, almost like a switch. And so the best way to do that I know how, is by using a remap. We might need several of them, we'll see. Actually, yes, we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4. So from this, what we can do on this is move this over just a little bit, and we are going to just reset these very quickly. And so now this will be modulated to here. Yeah. This one will be modulated to the same thing, so we might only need 3 because we can modulate that there. Usually I go from left to up, but on this one in particular we can do the opposite. So on this one we are going to go here to down to 100, and then here we are going to go, we only need 3. We're going to go from here to modulating that mix all the way up. Okay, and now that we have that, we're just going to create the same shape. So this is going to be a very strict curve, kind of like so, to where this is off and then on. Or you can set it the opposite way. So I'm not really sure which way this is supposed to go yet, but we're going to find out. We're going to we're going to fuck around and find out. Boy, I'll tell you what. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I think that this should be fine. But now that we have that, we can set this to modulate all 3 of these. And I don't know if this is going to work out, but let's see what happens. But basically, as you go here, turns that on, right? It's boom. So if we have this going on, and you can get a little bit more finicky with that if you want to, but I don't really find that to be necessary. What I'm also going to do though is I am going to take this one and map that here to this guy. Wait, wrong one. This guy, because we don't want that. So we can move that off. So now that we have this, we can go Reese versus Screech. And we, my friends, have made ourselves a dubstep bass versus some kind of neuro Reese bass or whatever, using a bunch of tools and stuff just to have some fun. So I had no idea what was going to come about. It's pretty cool, and this is how you can create really diverse patches and stuff with this. If you like this video, I would love it if you could leave a comment and like the video. And if you like the sounds that I make, I've got a lot of this stuff available on my website at alckemy.com. So yeah, thanks everybody. Much love. I'll see you later.